So the House and the Senate did vote on the railroad worker strike contract. Let me explain to you how this happened. They decided to do two different bills here. So one bill was the actual contract that would prevent them from going on strike. They did not include the sick leave pay as a part of that bill. The 7-day sick leave was a separate bill. Now, if that sounds familiar to you, then you may remember Build Back Better, because this is the same thing that happened with Build Back Better, where the agreement was that both have to pass together, right? Ro Khanna said that on multiple media outlets, and so did Pramila Jayapal. But in the end, they caved and decided, well, we had to get one of them to pass, so we just did the one and not the other. So one passed and the other didn't. All right, now that I took you back to that, let's come back forward. Similar situation. So this time around, the contract bill, which basically told them, you got to get back to work, you cannot go on strike. Of course, that bill passed in the House, no problem. That bill passed in the Senate, no problemo. But the 7-day sick leave bill, unfortunately, it passed in the House, but it did not pass in the Senate. And this is exactly what I was afraid of. This is exactly what I predicted would happen when you split them instead of including it all as one. Now, the squad, they're making a lot of excuses. Everybody out here making excuses as to why they did what they did. But tonight, I'm going to show you who voted which way and why they voted that way. I'm even going to show you a couple people who decided not to vote at all. Some you might be surprised by. But let's kick this off with Kshama Sawant, because she called it out clear as day. All but one of the squad crossed the picket line, voting with Dem Republican majority to break a rail workers' strike. A socialist cannot be a strike breaker. This should result in expulsion from DSA. Failing that, the squad's betrayal of workers becomes DSA's betrayal. And I'm glad she referenced DSA here, because I think it is important to note that they do represent Democratic Socialists of America. And there are certain policies that that organization has. And from what I've seen, there are some policies that the squad has not been implementing. They have not been following, and they have not been implementing those policies at all. Let's all remember, if we flash back towards last year when I told you that DSA, national DSA, wanted to remove Jamal Bowman because he violated their policy about Israel, because he went over to Israel multiple times, which is actually, that's not something that DSA is for. So there's been multiple situations about this where they have basically been violating what is in the DSA handbook. So Kshama Sawant hit the nail right on the head. No, a socialist would not do that, but they're not really socialists. And I told you they're coming up with a lot of excuses, and I just want to let you know it's not just me who's calling out their BS. Even people like Anna Kasparian is calling them out. Listen to this.
Example, AOC, for instance, again, yesterday tweeted, railroad workers grind themselves to the bone for this country as their labor produces billions for Wall Street. They demand the basic dignity of paid sick days. I stand with them. If Congress intervenes, it should be to have workers' backs and secure their demands in legislation. I agree, AOC, I totally agree with you on that. So I was really happy to find that you voted no on the legislation that you spoke out against just yesterday.
I kid you not. Like the tweet that AOC made, obviously that's not what she followed. Jamal Bowman too. We're going to get to him in a second, but I already told you guys before he's the weakest link. So you don't expect him to do anything really. But they put out these tweets, which I thought was a bad idea. They put out these tweets and then they voted against what they tweeted. They didn't even vote the way that they tweeted. And you got to ask, like, if people like Anna Kasparian is calling this out, you know, it has to be embarrassing. Because the people over at TYT that are telling you still support the squad, still go out there and support them, help them, canvas for them, volunteer for them. You have to try to give them a chance. It's embarrassing to see them just constantly not do what they say they're going to do. And then you're telling your audience all this time, you need to support them, give them a chance. But, you know, pride.
Except you didn't. You voted for the legislation you spoke out against on Twitter yesterday. See, I hope people understand that tweets don't necessarily translate into actions. And in this particular case, the only progressive who voted no on preventing the rail workers from striking was Rashida Tlaib. And
we're going to get into that in a second.
Deserves a world of credit for that. Now, let's get to the other part of it, right? The other part of this effort was to vote on legislation, a separate bill that would provide some paid sick leave. How did that do? Well, as David Dayen wrote on Twitter, the paid sick leave amendment got 3 Republicans in the House. Hard to see how it'll get 10 Republicans in the Senate. But as you can see from the graphic that he embedded in that tweet, you have the majority of the votes in favor of paid sick leave for the rail workers. So in other words, both bills did in fact pass in the House. It's good that they passed the legislation that would provide the paid sick leave. I'm happy about that, but I am not happy that Congress did in fact vote in favor of preventing the strike from happening in the first place. And if I were one of the progressive lawmakers, I would have voted no on one of the bills, the one intervening, and I would have voted yes on the other bill that provides an amendment that provides the sick leave that the workers not only demand, but absolutely deserve and should have as part of the new contract.
But Anna says this as though she really expected them to do that. I didn't expect them to do that. In fact, when I first heard about this, the first thing I said is, watch, they're going to fuck this up too. I didn't expect them to go against the majority of their party members in the House and be the lone wolf. I didn't expect them to do that. When have they done that? Now, we're not going to show you too much of Anna because I think she's just ridiculous at this point, because you got to get it by now. The writing's been on the wall. But Jamal Bowman, he was another one. He tweeted a certain way. And by the way, people really called him out for this. Listen to this. So Jamal Bowman said, listen, I can't in good conscience vote for a bill that doesn't give rail workers the paid leave they deserve. We fumbled this in Build Back Better. We can't do that again. And then he goes and does that again. Yes, Lee. Yes. It's so, you know what I'm saying? So the people like in the comments section, ay. This one. Oh, that's not the one I saw. Thank you for not blindly falling in line. Like some of the comments, people are like, what the? And then in turn, this is exactly what he did. See, Birkin says here, yeah, you did though. That was exactly what he did. He did what he said he would not do. It's a joke at this point. It's an absolute joke at this point. Now, to that point, Rashida Tlaib did decide to do the right thing. She decided to do the right thing. So Rashida Tlaib said this: I grew up in a union household. Collective bargaining is a key to economic justice. Today, our Congress not only voted to impose a contract on workers who rejected it, but the GOP and Manchin also failed to include the sick days workers were demanding. Shameful. So she was the only one that was willing to stand up to it. But again, don't go clapping your hands for her either, because like I said, this is just the rotating villain of the month. Because if it wasn't her, it probably would have been Ilhan Omar. I told you they take turns to decide who's going to be that one. They got to have at least one of them do it. So you also have to think about where Rashida Tlaib lives. Like, she represents Michigan, the Detroit area, right? So there's a lot of people that grew up in that area that know how beneficial unions can be. And I think that's important to note as well. But she was the only one. And she went on to say, I'd like to see any of these senators work a single month on a railroad. Then maybe they'd manage to find it in their hearts to put working families first instead of billionaire railroad bosses. And she ends here with, no worker should be forced to have to choose between their health and a paycheck. Out of the squad members, she's the only one that voted the way that they said that they would. The only one. Now, when it comes to the Senate, there were a few that decided they were not going to vote in favor of preventing the railroad workers from striking. Notice I said few. There were few. And Nina Turner actually called this out. Now listen to this. Democratic caucus senators voting to not break the railroad strike. So that's Warren, Sanders, Hickenlooper. I forgot about that guy. Damn. Gillibrand, Merkley. By the way, that's Merkley, not Markey. Just want to point that out for people who might think. Everyone else voted against the workers. So when it came to the Senate, these 5 did not vote in favor of the workers not being able to go on strike. Now, obviously, we expected Bernie Sanders to be for that. I wasn't sure about Gillibrand. I was kind of surprised to see that one. I don't even know who Merkley is, to be honest. Just keeping it real. Elizabeth Warren, she can be a hit or miss sometimes. But those 5, everybody else supported them going back to work and not being able to go on strike. Almost everybody else. Because there were some people who decided not to vote at all on both measures. Now, we're going to get to that in just a second. Because first, I want to show you who voted against the sick leave, the 7-day sick leave. Listen to this. Wait till you hear who supported it. This is some crazy shit. So I tweeted this. I said, told you so. 6 Republicans voted for sick leave measure. 6 Republicans, you guys. Mike Braun, Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, Josh Hawley, John Kennedy, and Marco Rubio. They all supported the railroad workers getting 7 days sick leave. But you know, Senator Joe Manchin was the only Democrat to vote against it. He was the only Democrat to oppose it. Now, if you're doing some math here in your head, you're like, wait a minute. That's not all the votes. That's not all of the people. You're correct. But first and foremost, Why is it, how the hell does Joe Manchin allow Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, and Josh Hawley, don't know the other dudes like that. How the hell does he let them vote along with his party and he chooses not to? Look, if Lindsey Graham is telling you, yes, we need to give them sick days, that should be an alert for you, bro. How you let Lindsey Graham do this, but not you? Now, Joe Manchin went on to say that he thought it would set a dangerous precedent. The fuck is that? You mean the president of people should have paid sick leave? How is that dangerous? Or maybe the precedent of people should have 7 days paid sick leave. Still, how is that dangerous? Because I can tell you, members of Congress, they're not getting 1 day paid sick leave. I think they have unlimited sick leave last time I saw. So is that a dangerous precedent, Joe Manchin? Is it a dangerous precedent for members of Congress to have unlimited sick leave? No, it's not. No, it's not. But like I said, those weren't all the votes. Let's see who decided not to vote. Now, this is the one that I think some of you are going to be like, oh, hells no. Hells no. Now, I have two resolutions here. I want to make sure. I think I have 2 links. I don't know what happened there. Let's go ahead and pull this up. You guys can actually see this on your own as well. What happened here? Oh, there we go. You can see this on your own as well. If you go to US Senate or Senate.gov, you can see all the bills. Now, I went ahead and made this easier for you guys. I went to the one I wanted to see, but all you have to do is click on the number. I want to make sure I went to the right one. Is this the, 8015. Okay, 8015. So this was the one in reference to the contract, whether or not they were going to go back to work and not be able to strike. So this passed 80-15. Let me show you who didn't vote. Here we have the non-voters. Burr from North Carolina did not vote. Hyde Smith from Mississippi did not vote. Murphy from Connecticut did not vote. And hello, Raphael Warnock, who is now in the middle of a runoff in Georgia, decided not to vote at all. And here's the thing. Some people are saying that he didn't vote because he is in the middle of the runoff and he thought it would hurt the runoff or whatever. You knew it was going to pass anyway. So why not show whether you support it or not? I don't like the non-voters, man. The whole non-voting thing is just weird to me. It's like, I'm not going to say, oh, workers' livelihood is on the line here. Yeah, I'm just not going to vote. So how does Raphael Warnock feel about the situation? We don't know because he decided not to vote. I'm sorry, Colin. I'm sorry, Colin. Oh, Colin's like, oh, hell no. Crazy, right? He didn't vote. Now, it's not just him. Like I said, I pointed out the other ones, but also, I think I put the wrong. I need to go to the other bill because I think I put this twice. Is this 80-50? Oh, no, I didn't. Okay. Now, this is the voting results for the sick leave. Now, this is the one that did not pass in the Senate. So there were 5 that did not vote. 5 that did not vote. Let's see who they were. Let's go down. Not voting. Cory Booker's whack ass. Burr from North Carolina. Hyde Smith from Mississippi. Murphy from Connecticut. And hello, Raphael Warnock from Georgia. So I have a question for you guys. Does Raphael Warnock not feel that those railroad workers deserve to have 7 days paid sick leave? This is the thing. Whether you knew it was going to pass or not, why didn't you support it? That's the thing that bothers me. That's what bothers me. Same thing with Cory Booker and Cory Booker to not vote at all. Where's your solidarity with the workers? Where's your support with the workers? Just nothing? I'm sorry, falsification. That Cory Booker's whack ass. I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. So I thought people might want to see that. I thought you guys might be curious to see that some people just decided, meh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans did not vote. That's 5. Let's go back up to the top, because when you look at the vote, terrible, terrible. And that's what I'm telling you. Some of them probably thought, well, we know it's not going to pass, so we're just not going to participate. It doesn't matter. People need to see if you support it or not. And you got a runoff happening? Okay. Now, there was a little bit of squabble about this on Twitter. Ryan Grimm did chime in and said that the squad voted exactly the way that the union wanted them to vote. Let's see what he had to say. And then I'm going to show you something that the union put out. So Ryan Grimm chimes in and says there seems to be a lot of confusion here about the vote yesterday. The unions wanted the Progressive Caucus and the squad to vote the way that they did so they could fight in the Senate. First of all, that don't make any sense. Why would you want to fight in the Senate when you got Joe Manchin on your team? You can disagree with that strategy, but it's the one the union settled on. Here's that word again, strategy. Now, he goes on to say, the strategy lets them fight in the Senate where they'll almost certainly lose. But they reason that almost certainly losing is better than certainly losing, which is what they were headed for in the House. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Which is what they were headed for in the House, because Pelosi had the vote she needed to impose the bad agreement. He goes on to say, if your theory is that the squad should ignore what the union wants, that's fine, but make the argument for why that's the right thing to do. Now, that's what Ryan Grimm is saying here, but that's interesting because even TYT, even they're not saying that. Now, when Shahid Buttar was here, he did explain that Ryan Grimm has a direct line to AOC, so he can just contact her while a lot of others cannot. And that shows because she responded here, yes, and not just national leadership either. We follow the strategy, ask of our local unions, including rank and file we've picketed alongside before, like 202, as well as nationals that rejected ratification. In New York 14, locals' ask was yes, yes, so we could send paid sick to the Senate. Why would you send paid sick leave to the Senate when you have Joe Manchin in the Senate? So that's what Ryan Grimm said, and that's what AOC said. Now, it sounds like to me, Ryan Grimm, he probably got that source from AOC because she responded directly. See how she responded to certain people. But what exactly did the union say? Because you see, they put out a statement. And I saw this morning. So let's see what the union actually had to say. Now, this is the press release from the Railroad Workers United press release. I'll make this bigger because tiny people. Now, this was released again today, December 2nd, 2022. Democrats, then Republicans smite rail labor. Listen to this, you guys. While Railroad Workers United finds it despicable but not surprising, that both political parties opted to side with big business over working people yesterday and vote against the interests of railroad workers not once, but twice within hours. We suffered a 1-2 punch at the hands of, first, the Democratic Party. Second, the Republic. What was that? We suffered a 1-2 punch at the hands of, first, the Democratic Party. Second, served up by the Republicans. The Railroad Workers United, they're blaming both parties. Both. But yet I'm seeing politicians on Twitter say it's all the Republicans' fault. This is the statement from the organization telling you that they're blaming both parties. Let's go on. First, responding to the wishes of President Biden and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the House voted to legislate a contract that the majority of U.S. freight rail workers had previously voted to reject. The Senate would quickly follow suit. In effect, their actions simply overrode our voices and desires. Rail workers, like all workers, should have the right to bargain collectively and to freely engage in strike activity if and when the members see fit and when they democratically elect to do so. Bring it on back for the people in the back. Again, the House voted to legislate a contract that the majority of freight rail workers had previously voted to reject. So I'm a little bit confused because Ryan Grimm is saying one thing, AOC is saying one thing, Rashida Tlaib split from the whole pack and was like, nah. Jamal Bowman is saying something else. Everybody, they're all over the place. And those are responses on Twitter. But this is a press statement. So if it were up to you, who are you going to listen to? The people tweeting? Or are you going to listen to the press statement from the actual Railroad Workers United? Let's go on. Railroad workers, like all workers, should have the right to bargain collectively and freely engage in strike activity if and when members see fit and when they democratically elect to do so. Within hours of the Senate vote sealing our fate on Thursday afternoon, we would suffer a second defeat, this time at the hands of the other party of big business, the Republican Party. That bill, which would have been mandated that all railroad workers receive 7 days of paid sick leave, would receive just a handful of votes from Republicans in the House and crucially in the Senate, where it went down to defeat. This 1-2 punch from the two political parties is despicable. That's coming from General Secretary Jason. Politicians are happy to voice platitudes and heap praise upon us for our heroism throughout the pandemic, the essential nature of our work, the difficult and dangerous and demanding conditions of our job. Yet when the steel hits the rail, they back the powerful and wealthy class one rail carriers every time. This is the union calling out the fact that the politicians back wealth, they back the corporations, and they back corporate interest. It's not just me. It's not just RBN. It's not just Hardlands Media. It's not just Jimmy Dore. It's not just anyone that was a part of this Bernie Sanders movement that realized both of these parties are screwing people over. Let's go. Railroad Workers United understands that this fight for justice will continue in the coming months and years. The rail carriers are too powerful and are a scourge to the national economy. They need to be taken into public ownership and run in the interest of workers, shippers, passengers, and the nation, not a handful of wealthy stockholders. That sounds like to me they're calling for a worker co-op. Public ownership of the railroads. What do you know? What do you know? RWU believes the railroad workers need to explore other options than the two existing political parties. Say it again. Explore other options than the existing two political parties, since neither appear to have our backs. RWU also believes that railroad workers need to consider doing away with the archaic and divided craft union system that hampers our unity and solidarity, and initiate the process of building a single and powerful railroad workers union that can win future rounds of contract bargaining. We have all played for well over a century by politicians and union officials alike. We have all been played for well over a century by politicians and union officials alike. The fiasco of recent months will show that perhaps the time has come for railroad workers to push for a unified and powerful labor organization of all crafts, together with a political party that will better serve the interests of not just the railroad workers, but all the working class people. And right here is Railroad Workers United calling for a labor party. What'd I tell you? What'd I tell you? You see how that work? Is AOC sharing that? Is Jamal Bowman sharing this press release? I don't think so, because I replied to him and I said, this is the press release. So that's that. Eric, can we go ahead and look at the poll? Whee! All right, 474 votes. Should Congress intervene with union contracts? 8% said yes, and 84% said no, and 7% said that they are not sure. Interesting.